I'm Jeffrey Rickman, and I'm sitting down with Tim Simpson, who's the new superintendent of schools at Nowata Public Schools. He agreed. He's new. He's got a lot of other things he could do. He agreed to sit down with me in the church studio and do me the favor of, on this platform, trying to provide a portrait of who he is and what he's about. So I would invite you, if you're connected to the community of Nowata or you're just curious about the state of public education in small rural towns, tune in, stay with us, and I'll just invite you to pay attention and know how it is that you can support Tim and what he's hoping to do here in Nowata. So, Tim, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm grateful and humbled and appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to be able to do something like this. And as we were saying before the cameras turned on, my hope is that that we are building up the community of Nowata together. That your institution and my institution and several other institutions around town can come around this town and help build up some of the social trust that maybe has been lost or kind of fallen by the wayside over the last few years. So you're stepping into an institution where there's been some turnover over the last few years. I've known some of the superintendents before you, and they've been excellent leaders, but I'm eager to get to know you, and so maybe we could get a basic bio about you, where you're from, and what you're passionate about.
Okay. Started off born, raised in small town in Northeast Ohio, Wadsworth, Ohio, and came from a very humble background. Beginnings, it was struggled a little bit. We had challenges as a family, like a lot of families, and didn't necessarily do well in school as a student myself. And after high school, thought I had some limited options. I decided to join the military, and so military brought me to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and I was in the military for 3 years. Was in a service-connected accident, and that facilitated me being medically but honorably discharged, and I had to take a different route for my life at that point. And because at the time I was fully intending on making the military a career, so I started college and started off as an accounting major. It wasn't for me, and took a few classes revolving around education, and found that was my niche. That's what I wanted to do, and so I became an English teacher and started my career then in Lawton, Oklahoma, teaching at MacArthur Junior High School, ninth grade English, and was a teacher for 15 years between Lawton, and spent 5 years in Cache. And when my son graduated high school, he had a scholarship that took him back into Ohio, and my wife and I decided we wanted to follow him. And so at that point I moved from being a teacher and a coach into administration, and became a middle school principal in Wellington, Ohio.
What year was that you moved back to Ohio?
That was 2013.
Okay.
We went back to Ohio.
Okay.
And I was nope, sorry about that. That was 2009.
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay, 2009, I went back to Ohio and spent 6 years as a middle school principal. Son graduated college, took a job in Chicago. My wife and I decided we wanted to move back to Oklahoma to be a little bit closer to her family. Her mom was going through, and still is going through, some medical issues, and we kind of pulled at our heartstrings. We wanted to get a little closer.
Sure.
So ended up taking a job in Oklahoma City schools. Lived in Yukon, and worked at Classen SAS, which is a wonderful school, and as a principal there for 2 years. And then I accepted a position as a superintendent for Wynnewood Public Schools, and
Okay.
spent the last 6 years down south on I-35 in Wynnewood, and fortunately ended up now being hired by Nowata Public Schools, and so here I am.
So you have how many kids?
I have two. I have a son and a daughter. Daughter lives in Northeast Ohio, and the son outside of Chicago.
Okay. So
Two
they're
new grandbabies too.
oh, it's hard to
So-
be that far from grandbabies. So I hope you're able to get up there. And well, are you driving up there regularly?
We fly as much as we can
Sure.
just because we can spend more time there that way.
Sure.
My wife works for the Wynnewood refinery, and they're on a rotating type shift, so she gets off 7 days each month, and that allows her to go back and see the grandkids a lot more than I get to. But I'm glad that she's able to do that. So we don't see them nearly as much as I would like to, but between them coming here and us being able to go there on breaks and different times, we're able to establish a relationship. A lot of FaceTiming going on too.
Of course, yeah. It's a great time for technology.
Absolutely.
So you've had two kids that you've raised as a career educator, and then you had how many years in as an educator coach before you became an administrator?
15.
15 years.
15
okay.
years. Yes, sir.
All right, so that's a good base. So what are things that you find that you're from your personal experience, lessons you learned from your personal experience that you're passionate about in the local school system, teachers and administrators knowing how to do to not necessarily serve, but to serve, educate children and touch their families. What are some things that you as a unique educator came to value and go ahead.
I understand, and you hit the nail on the head when you said serve, because that's ultimately, I feel as an educator, that's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
And I take that very, very seriously, and I take it to heart. Coming from the humble beginnings that I did and the challenges that I had to work through, and being raised in an environment that didn't value education, I have come to be an advocate for I feel voices who are marginalized, for the underdog. I am, if you always have those kids that struggle. They come to school, and on the outside, what you see are kids that might be labeled as a problem student or a troublemaker or this, and all kids are good. There are underlying reasons for why those behaviors come out and why things do the way they do, and sometimes you just have to take the time to understand those kids, to have a relationship. One of the most important things we can do as educators, I believe, is building relationships with our students, building relationships, and that goes with everything, with our staff. We have to be able to understand where they're coming from, why they're making the decisions they make, so that ultimately then we can provide the right type of service and the right kind of help, so that hopefully then by the time that they graduate, we're able to put them on a path that leads them to a fruitful life and successful life.
Yeah. One of the reasons I was kind of reluctant to use the word serve is because so many people increasingly come to the public education system as consumers, and here's what we want you to do for us, and it's much more than teaching math and reading. Sometimes it's, I want you to teach my kids discipline, but I want you to have your hands tied behind your back. I want you to equip them to do any number of things, and I don't want them to be a hassle whenever they come home, and I want them to get good grades. And so often they put things on the plates of educators that are on their plate, So I wonder if, I don't know what the way forward is that helps adults, parents take responsibility for what happens in their homes and work collaboratively alongside of the public school system as the public school system tries to build up their children. It's an odd time that we're living in. I've seen a comic where it shows the 1950s and it shows today, where in the 1950s, it's the parents on the side of the teacher being cross with the child, saying, "We need you to straighten up." But today it has a new picture where it's the parents sitting with the kid looking at the teacher saying, "We need you to straighten up." And I wonder if we're better off today than we were in the 1950s. And of course, you can't turn back the clock, but I do want to do what we can to help parents here to come alongside of the school system and not expect y'all to do everything for them, but to say, hey, you're the ones teaching them basic skills for succeeding in life, and we're going to handle the emotional values piece of it. So is that something that you've run up against a lot, or have you mostly found parents to be pretty easy in the school systems you've come from.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think there has been, over time, there has been sort of this switch or the roles that are now being required in school districts that perhaps weren't there 30 years ago. And so we struggle with that, but we also know we know what we can control, and that's when we have those kids with us from 8 to 3. We have control over that time. We don't have a lot of control over what happens before 8 a.m. and after 3 p.m.
Right, yeah.
However, one thing that's very important, and it is a priority of mine coming into Nowata, and it's been a priority of mine wherever I've been, is that we have to work twice as hard right now to bring parents on board, to make them a part of the educational team, and so that it isn't like that comic illustrated view where you've got a butting of heads
Right.
between a parent and an educator. We have to become a team. If we want to do the right thing by kids,
Yeah.
it takes a village, and it takes all of us. It takes community partners. It takes our churches. It takes our businesses. It takes all of us
Right.
to be able to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to ensure the success of our students moving
Exactly.
forward. So one thing that I believe in is building those relationships with the parents, making sure and inviting them to be part of the educational community. COVID really threw a wrench into that because
sure.
it forced everybody to stay away, and so that threw a wrench into things that we were doing when I was with Wynnewood at the time, and we're slowly being able to come back out of that, and I get that, and I understand that there are still issues revolving around that area, but by and large, we need to go ahead and work towards creating those opportunities for parents to understand what's going on within the walls of the buildings of the schools that their children attend, and to be welcome there, and to feel that they're a part of that
Yeah.
team. And so those kinds of things are important, and we have gotten away from that, I believe, over the last 20 or 30 years. But it's something that in order for us to be successful, I think we have to figure it out, and I
Yeah.
think we have to be able then to come up with solutions that include everybody.
Yeah, it's as you're talking about it, it's so clear to everybody that children need more attention, not less, and it's not just from parents and educators, but also other supportive institutions like the church. I'm pretty proud of the children's ministry we have in our church, where we are. We have a crew of about 7 kids that are here. Well, probably more like 9 or 10 that are here every week, that we're really working on teaching basic doctrines of the faith, memory retention, scripture engagement, knowing how to navigate books and be comfortable reading. Those are things that I think in a community of faith can easily operate alongside of the school system and push children towards excellence.
Absolutely.
But also there's this reality that once upon a time school systems dealt mostly with children that were average balanced emotionally, intellectually. And what's happened in the last couple decades is the school system has been expected to absorb all the children, every single child, and meet them where they are and give very tailored service, which of course is a very high order for teachers, much less administrators who are.
Absolutely.
And I would actually say the word impossible when we're looking at whether or not that can actually be done. I think so often the cards are stacked against you guys to accomplish things that really can't be accomplished. And so I think you're right to focus on parental involvement. I read this book a few years ago called Alienated America. The author's name is escaping my mind, but he showed that the success of public schools hinges not necessarily on income, but on parental involvement in the school system. The more parents you have helping teachers, providing opportunities for students that they don't have when they just have a skeleton crew at the school, that really seems to make a huge difference so far as outcomes with kids. And so how is it that you imagine that parents can come alongside you and the administrators and the teachers to build up our children as best as we're able as a community?
Well, I think that it begins with the district being inviting and being welcoming and making sure that we have opportunities for parents to come in and understand what we're doing. I think that the onus of responsibility begins with us to reach out and to invite. I think that if the only time we're connecting with parents is when their child is doing something wrong,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
we're digging ourselves a hole that we're
Yeah.
not going to be able to get out of. So
Yeah.
the communication has to be different, and our mindset has to be different. One of the things that as we discuss what it was like before and what it's like now, is technology and screen time,
Right.
social media,
Yeah.
the different things, and so there's a battle too that we're trying to compete with kids now. It's a lot of instant gratification, and,
Right.
and everything is in a 30-second soundbite. And so as a result of that, over time, I believe that biologically, your attention spans are becoming shorter.
Yeah.
And it becomes more difficult than, a teacher has to be a performer in order, to keep kids' attention. If you ask me what probably is one of the most important things in a classroom that I look for that when I walk into a classroom is engagement. Are we engaging our students? Are we keeping their attention? But some of the realities that revolve around that is just, it is very, very difficult for our staff and for our teachers to jump through sometimes, and I call it jumping through the hoops, but almost, putting on this show or being this type of performer to be able to keep their attention.
Right.
So some of it is there's almost a biological change and I believe in what kids used to be and where they are now.
Yeah.
I am a big proponent of reading. I was an English teacher. I
Sure.
believe that literacy is the foundation for success for our students.
Right.
What we see is we see gaps. We see kids coming to elementary school, and there might be a gap in their leaving. They might be in second grade, but they're not necessarily at a second grade reading level.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we've got to work. And you had mentioned meeting kids where they're at, and that does become tricky and it is complicated. But focusing on literacy and trying to eliminate that gap, and then maintaining that reading level for those kids as they work through elementary school into junior high. Junior high is where all of a sudden you see, well, you got a lot of discipline problems. It's from a biological standpoint, junior high years are tricky. It's tough. The hormones are raging. There's different things. There's just in their development, just in their natural development that they're going through, that we've gone through since the beginning of time
Right,
when it
yeah.
comes to kids.
Yeah.
And so we have to, but what also becomes obvious then is that literacy gap that when you're in third grade isn't so big, but as
It gets
you
worse,
go
it
through,
compounds, yeah.
and by the time you're in seventh and eighth grade, now it's a bigger grab. Now you have an eighth grader that's reading on third or fourth grade level, and they're not understanding what they're reading. And so they're also, very socially conscious, and they don't want to appear like they don't know. So you have behaviors. They act out. They do things to distract from the obvious problem.
Right.
Is that they don't understand what they're doing, but they don't want everybody to know that. They don't want them to think that they're dumb. They don't want them to think
Sure,
that they don't
yeah.
know. So you have these negative behaviors that will appear, and as they go from junior high then on to high school, you stop caring, and then their grades drop and they fail, and now you've got your dropout rates because what's the point? I'm
Right.
failing anyway. Why even go to school? And so, we put kids, I feel, on this pathway that if we don't address, and I'm probably way oversimplifying it by saying it's a literacy problem, but I believe that if we can get that under control and we can figure out how to close those gaps and keep kids reading on grade level, that a lot of the problems that we face are going to take care of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Jordan Peterson says not just reading, but writing. Learning how to read and write is learning how to think. And if you don't know how to do those things, then you cannot think as well. You cannot critically think. You cannot manage information well.
Absolutely.
And so learning how not just to read, but to write is so critical. I spent, I want to say, a year and a half volunteering at a first grade classroom here in Nowata Public Schools. And I I would just sit at a desk outside of the classroom and take one child at a time who would come out and read to me. And the disparity in reading ability at that point was tremendous, you know. And I noticed that in my own children. I have a 7-year-old now who she took to reading like that at 4 years old. I got a 5-year-old now boy who's not taken nearly as quickly and gets irritated with it. So, you know, I understand there's, you know, some of it is different children are capable of different outputs, but there's also the reality that when you have a whole classroom with very disparate IQs, very disparate situations whenever they get home, it's an immensely tremendous job to keep kids all on the same page moving forward together, especially whenever it's not the norm to hold kids back. And I know it's still done sometimes, but I feel like it's much more rare than once upon a time it was. Maybe that's an illusion. But I think you're absolutely right to focus on reading as core and key. Someone's just not going to succeed in life if they don't know how to read. There's very limited jobs that they can do, capacities in which they can operate in society. We absolutely need to focus on reading as well as we can. I don't know if you saw it or not. Barry Weiss has an outlet where she does in-depth reporting on social changes. One of them is reading in the public education system in America. And one of the things that she reported on was once upon a time, reading was taught phonetically, where you learn to just fit the letters together and see the general rules. And over the last 20, 30 years, that is not the method. It's teaching context clues and like guessing. There was a word for it, and I don't remember it. But it seems like once upon a time, we weren't as confused as a society about how to do basic education. And for some reason, a lot of the basics just kind of got weird. As you look at newer models of education versus older models, understanding that we don't have the kids that we had in the 1950s who would sit at a desk and remain quiet and respectful, do you consider your sensibilities more old school, thinking that one-room school teachers knew what they were doing and that there is something to be said for just simplicity of reading, math, basics, or do you find yourself much more drawn to newer modes of thinking that are focused on tech, what do they call that, STEM skills and preparing people not for critical thinking necessarily, but for doing jobs? Or do you think that the education system should be doing all of it, and that we should be able to, I guess I got too spread out on that question, but I do wonder as you're trying to manage our children, serve our children in this context, what do you think is realistic? Do you think that we should be sending them all to college, getting them all jobs, or finding ways to meet each kid where they are and just not have a default, just meet them where they are?
That's a great question.
And, it's too big a question.
And,
that was a stupid
and
question.
It is. You're talking about an issue though that's complex to the very least. However, to answer your question, I think that in education we tend to almost be like a pendulum. We're either way up here and we're doing like when we went to the Common Core math.
I meant to ask about that.
So when a new educational trend and there's buzzwords that go along with that, we jump on board and we're all the way up here and then we realize a few years later that, you know what, that's not working. And so now we're going to swing all the way back here, and we're going to go this direction. Yeah. And so it's almost an all or nothing. And I'm not talking about necessarily your local public schools. I'm talking about things that happen to come down from state departments of education about how we need to do things, and different theorists who are all on one. They're focused on one way of doing things. I do believe in balance and in moderation, but more importantly, I believe in doing what works. And so if you ask me, I am more old school when it comes to some things. I do believe that there's value in our kids when you're in elementary school learning their times tables and their addition and subtraction tables and memorizing those.
Rote learning.
And doing those things because that's a foundation. That's a foundational tool that they need to be able to do math.
Right.
All right. So I do believe in doing that. You had brought up, or gave an example when you were talking about the old school versus the technology and having and bringing all that in. I think there's a place for that,
Yeah.
but I don't think that we need to do it for the sake of doing it just because it looks good
Yeah.
on paper or because it's a soundbite, and on Facebook. I don't believe I don't believe in that. I think that if there is an applicable way that we need to be using technology that does advance, and another thing is that it's not technology isn't it's a tool. It's what helps us achieve our goal of educating our kids. So
Right.
it's not the technology. Just using it for the sake of using it is in my mind a wrong way, and it's not a fruitful way of using that. Technology ought to be used as a tool to help further our children's education.
Right.
And so, which means that it doesn't have to. We don't have to fall for the newest gimmick. And I'll say that I think
Right.
a lot of times, and I'm not pointing. It's easy to grab for the shiny bulb on the tree.
Yeah.
That's going to get a lot of attention, but that's not necessarily the right way that we need to go about it.
Right.
So, from an educational stance, I do believe that there has to be a balance of both the ways that we have done things in the past,
Right.
because I do believe that there's a lot of ways that worked, and so just because it doesn't involve an iPhone or an iPad or something like that doesn't
Right.
mean that it's not effective. And so I think that we've got to allow teachers, and we have to train teachers to understand that we need to use methods that work for our kids,
Right.
and not just use a method because it happens to be the newest thing and we're going to order this. And look at our school. We have smart monitors and we
look
can
at
do
us,
these
yeah.
things and do this. Again, all that stuff looks great, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, is it helping us do our job?
Right.
And so I think I'm the kind of guy that believes in a balance, and more importantly, I believe in using the tools that work.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like wisdom. I read an article several years ago now on how Sesame Street was the beginning of the end for education that isn't fun on the front end. As we're talking about declining attention spans, that we learned that education is supposed to be both quality and fun, and trying to do both those things at the same time in many ways makes it so that teachers feel like they have to be entertainers rather than once upon a time teachers were not trying to entertain. They were just learn your times tables. Look at these letters, fit them together. I have an immense level of pity and sympathy really for educators. And I know some personally who have so much energy for figuring out what works for kids. And I think that's wonderful. And I have no doubt, I know several of the teachers here locally, wonderful people who care very much about their students. I think they're very much going to appreciate your desire for balance. You're not closed to technology or newer ways of doing things, but also you don't think that the way we did things in the 50s and 60s and 70s was entirely wrong-headed and needed to be upended. So we just need to take the lessons of the old and build with the new, and I think that's what wisdom sounds like. You did bring up, just briefly, there are state boards of education, or there are state standards that have to be met, and that has to do with all kinds of limitations. It also has to do with kind of the ethos that you have in the schools. We have I forget his actual title. Is his name Ryan Walters, who's the head of education?
The state superintendent, yes, sir.
State superintendent. He's made kind of his bread and butter the culture war, anti-woke stuff. It's something that all cards on the table I think is a real thing. I've seen a lot of stuff that concerns me on East and West Coast in America, things happening in the public school system that I think are not the place of school to be doing necessarily. I guess I'm telling you how to answer your question. I shouldn't do that. But when you're talking about social emotional learning, efforts to socialize our kids in the school system, and of course they use the language of we're just teaching them to function well out in the world. We're teaching them the skills that they need not to be bad people when they get out. But how much of that stuff of socializing our children in this brave new world we're living in, do you feel that is the responsibility of the school, or do you really think that the school needs to primarily just focus on basic education, basic discipline issues, and those values and ways to be in relationship? That's more the parents and other institutions' jobs.
It would be nice if that's what we were able to focus on, but that's not the reality that we live in. We, unfortunately, we do a lot of, we help raise children in our schools, but I think that we've always helped raise our children in schools. A child's in school, 6, 7 hours, whatever they are a day,
Right.
and that's a big chunk of their day. So there's obviously going to be influence. Now,
Sure.
what I do believe is that, and I think that unfairly, teachers get condemned for doing things, and I can't say if they do them or don't. I know that in my 31 years that practically across the board, when they're teaching their kids in a classroom, they're not teaching them what to think. They're trying to teach them how to think.
Sure.
And I think, and I also, you had brought up critical thinking and how
Yeah.
important that is. How to be able to determine fact from fiction. How to be able to look at an issue and be able to extract things that aren't biased. Now, it's tough because back when I was a kid, when you turned on the news or you read the paper, it was an unbiased view. They gave facts and they talked about a situation, but it wasn't swayed or politicized as it is now. Because right now everything is politicized.
Yes.
My problem in Oklahoma is the politicizing of public education, and there's no room for that.
Yeah.
And in my mind, we can't politicize it, and it's not about a political. Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or an independent, or something else, there's no room for that. But what we have to be able to do is say, okay, in your history classes, or your government classes, your civics classes, here are the tenets of the Republican Party. Here are the tenets of a Democratic Party. Sure. Here is where they started. Here is how they've evolved, and be able to have a discussion with that without fear of losing your license because you're saying something that somebody at the State Department doesn't agree with. And again, we're not inviting, in my mind, we're not over there saying, this is one of the reddest states in the country.
Sure.
And so, but if you listen to our state superintendent, we're all liberal classrooms trying to push a liberal agenda. And that's just not true. And but what is true is that what teachers do, like they've always done, is say, okay, we want you to be able to think for yourself. That's the goal. We want you to make a determination and be able to make up your own mind. So trying to teach kids how to do that is difficult, but it always has been. And I think it's more difficult now because of the exposure they get to different media outlets and sources, on whether it's Facebook and those types of things, or even our own news stations. No longer is it an unbiased view.
Right.
There's going to be, depending on what station you want to put on, there's going to be a slant.
Sure.
And so having the tools to be able to discern what is an opinion or what is fiction from what is fact becomes extremely difficult. Remember when we were kids, and you're young, and so you may not even done this, but I remember having to do research, and I was going through the card catalogs and looking up magazine articles and journals and different things to get my research from. And so with the internet and with the you don't know what sources are reputable and what sources you can rely on. So learning how to do research, in my mind, is much more difficult than it used to be. But it's also much more important now that we give kids the tools to be able to come up with and understand and discern opinion from fact, fact from fiction.
Yeah. Well, and I saw recently a video produced in the early 1950s that was ostensibly a child sitting down with an instructor at school who is explaining how propaganda works and different ways in which people's minds are manipulated. And once upon a time, this was a video that was actually commonly showed in the public education system. It's felt to me as though there are many practical things so far as navigating the world wisely that some public schools have neglected to the detriment of students. And so something that I have a hobby horse about is fiscal management of a household is something that generally the American population is terrible at. I want to say 60% of American households cannot afford an unexpected $400 expense. And when that's the case, I mean, yes, there's an income issue there, but there's also a money management issue there. And the vast majority of students I've known that are graduating from public schools do not know how to balance a checkbook or do the equivalent digitally, do not know how to govern their desires and say no to themselves when they have the money in the bank not to spend it. I'm very hopeful, and I've talked to previous superintendents about it. I'm hopeful that there can be some kind of mandatory class for graduates. I don't know if you can even do that by state law, where they have to learn how to do these things, how to have a budget, but also basic homemaking. There are a lot of, once upon a time, schools had homemaking classes that what they called home economics, I think they called it.
Yeah.
Where you had to learn how to cook, how to care for a baby, how to do basic house cleaning. And I step into households all the time where people, they don't magically know how to do this. They never learned. And they're you have 30, 40-year-old people that are so intimidated by this. We just started a ministry a few months ago called Bountiful Tables, where women are gathering to learn how to cook together and make meals together and take them home to their families. And you wouldn't believe how hard it's been just convincing some women to join them because they're so insecure about their inabilities in the kitchen. There's some basics about life that, you can say that parents are responsible for, but it sure would be nice if you had shop and home economics class and basic finance that would equip students. How much are your hands tied, the school district, public education, is that something that can even be done the way it used to anymore? Or is that just something where there's a hard no there, or you just need to focus on other priorities that kind of preclude that? I've just been curious about this for some time.
Oh, Jeffrey, that's and it's funny that you bring that up because I believe that school districts are going back to that. Now, the shop, maybe not so much. They're not doing that. That's with the vocational technology centers offering that type of thing. You don't see that so much as you do in high schools, but Nowata's bringing back home ec this year.
Hey, that's great.
And I brought it to Wynnewood. I'm not the one that brought it to Nowata. That was done, and that was a great decision.
Excellent.
That was something that I would have done. And you're right. There is a lack of some fundamental life knowledge, life skills that I do believe that there is a place for that in public schools, and that it should be taught. Yeah. I'm excited about the we're bringing that back to Nowata. I think that's a great thing. I think it was a great thing in Wynnewood.
Right.
Sewing. I learned how to sew a button on. I had home ec when I was a kid in high school. I can still sew a button on it. If a button falls off a shirt, I can thread a needle and sew on a button.
Nice.
Yeah. And so, in these different things, now I wasn't great with my shop skills. I will tell you that. I made a birdhouse and some things, and wasn't exactly what I would call, my angles weren't necessarily right angles, and it wasn't really balanced when I was done. But it was something that opened, it gave me an opportunity to see if that was a skill or something that if I did have an inclination toward, that could be a career path.
Yeah.
You had brought up about career paths and about getting kids ready for college and I meant to touch on that.
Yeah, please.
But there are trades are every bit as important as going to college, and as a matter of fact, maybe even more so now because we seem to have less people interested in going into a trade. Part of that's because it's a lot of work,
Right.
and it's hard work, but it is lucrative if you do that and you have an aptitude for it or an inclination to learn that. Absolutely, I think it's great. So I'm a proponent
Sure.
of it isn't about whether or not I think that it's at one point, that pendulum I was talking about. We were trying to get everybody college ready.
Yeah.
And that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
Because everybody's not going to go to college, and college isn't for everyone. Thank goodness for that, too.
Right, yeah.
How would our society be if we didn't have plumbers, electricians, bricklayers, and laborers, and different people to do the hard stuff, to do the things that need to be done that build our infrastructure,
Yeah.
and to keep us moving on it, truck drivers, to keep us moving forward on a daily basis. So it isn't about whether or not that we should be proud if 60-70% of our kids go to college. That's not something we should be looking at as a point of pride, or even something that I think it's a data point you look at.
Sure.
But I don't think it's something that we look at and say, "Ooh, we've got to raise the level of attendance of our kids coming out of high school going into college."
Right, yeah.
No, what you look at is, okay, after high school, have we set them up so that they can go be an electrician's apprentice? Have we created a pathway for them earlier on,
Yeah.
beginning even as early as junior high, 7th and 8th grade, where we're exposing them to different occupations, so that when they do graduate, they don't walk off the stage and go back home and sit down at a video game and have absolutely
sure.
no clue as to how they're going to support themselves or what they want to do with the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And so I do believe it's our responsibility to introduce kids to as many different pathways and options as we can, so that hopefully that when they do graduate, they have a sense of what they might like,
Right.
and so that they can create their own future then from that point.
I hope it works that way. I've seen, we've introduced my kids to knitting, crocheting. I never learned to do these things. I never had the want to. We've introduced them to cooking and different basic things, and it's weird to see that they like things that I didn't as a kid. That they like things that I really was not good at, and I'm still not good at.
Sure.
And there was nothing indicating to me that they fit a certain profile, and maybe they're not going to in the future. Maybe they're going to change. But the only way to really know if someone has a passion and a skill for something is to introduce them to it.
Absolutely.
And it's just a very basic form of doing things. And yet so often, there's a huge investment on the end of doing something new, learning something new. And there's a recalcitrance that children learn a lot of times from cranky adults like me to just let me do it the way I do it. And school can be this wonderful opportunity to learn new things and dip your toes into, and hopefully by the time they've gone through the system, they've learned that, hey, I really enjoyed, they're not going to have shop class, but home ec, or I really enjoyed learning how to budget, or I really enjoyed, I think I have some VOTEC skills, or man, I really enjoy the world of ideas and I think I should go to college. So I love the balance that you're given. I love the overall ethos you're presenting. Of course, we're going to be watching you for the coming years and learning how it is that gets put into practice, and how it is that your values impact the staff and the culture at the schools. And of course, you're limited by the personalities that are there. You can't just come in and I'm this way, so everybody, and I don't hear you wanting to do that at all. You're going to work with what you got, and you're going to lead, hopefully, in the ways that would help our children flourish. The thing I knew I wanted to end on was inviting you to talk about the ways in which parents and community leaders can support you and your teachers and administrators over the coming. Let's just talk about the first year, and then maybe if it goes well, we'll do this again or something. But over the coming year, as you're getting to know us, we're getting to know you. What is it that we can do for you that would just really make things a lot easier?
I think that there has to be a willingness to have a relationship with our school districts and our staff. And when I say that, I specifically I mean communication. Again, if what we would like to see, and what personally I would like to see, is that if a parent or somebody in the community, maybe they've heard something or maybe they see something that doesn't sit well with them. And so instead of either letting that little seed grow into something bigger than it should be, or hurry and getting on Facebook and saying, I saw, this going on, and then all of a sudden you have, 30 comments where people are going to pipe up, and maybe that incident, maybe there's truth to it, maybe there's not.
Sure.
But I think that if what I would encourage are conversations.
Right.
That's what I want to see. I want to see open lines of communication with our community and our parents, with our school district. I do not want battles to be fought out on social media, or I don't want people just to shrug their shoulders and say, well, that's just the way that the school's doing it, and there's nothing I can do about it. I want them to know that we are here for them, and we will listen to them. But that has to be a reciprocal thing. We'll reach out too.
Yeah.
That has to be something that, again, as I begin this year, that I impart to my staff, is having that same open heart, if you will, to understanding, just to be good listeners, and to understanding what maybe an issue that a parent might be going through, or that a child might be going through. Understanding those things goes a long way to coming up with solutions to problems.
Right.
And so not everything has to be a monumental issue. And I think that as technologically advanced as we get, and as easy sometimes as it seems like it is getting to communicate, that communication is a lot of times done in isolation. Text messages, emails, those things are, those are fine and they have a place. But I'm not sure that when, and I'll give you an example real quick.
Sure, yeah.
I've had situations to where I've had young teachers, there's been a problem with a parent, and so they literally send 30 to 40 messages, emails back and forth, each one building with intensity and divisiveness.
Yeah.
When it could have probably been handled with a 5-minute conversation, because somebody misconstrued a tone that was
Sure.
in that email,
Yeah.
or something wasn't phrased the right way. So the person on the other end, not having that ability to be able to clarify or see their face or understand that tone, taking it wrong, and now the original problem is not even the problem anymore. They've built a wall, and so the communication has become it's become broken, and it's become divisive.
Yeah.
And so that's what, we talked about some of the old ways versus some of the new ways. I do believe that open lines of face-to-face conversation, if not face-to-face, at least a phone call where they're talking to each other, and being able to work through a problem. And I know sometimes that's hard, picking up that phone and dialing that number, because that it might not be, it might be a hard conversation.
Right.
But 9 times out of 10, when you hang that phone up, if both people have approached that with an open heart and an open mind,
Yeah.
and if the focus always remains on what's best for the kid, and so, and you'd hear me say that a lot. Decisions, all of our decisions, need to be based on what's best for
Right.
kids.
Exactly.
And so it's not about me and my personal feelings. It's not about that. It's about, okay, is the route we're going, is that what's best for this young man or young woman moving forward?
Yeah.
And so we keep our focus on what's best for kids, and keeping an open mind and an open heart when it comes to that person sitting across the table from us, and truly listening to what they have to say, and hearing their issue or their problem, and not just discounting it right off the bat.
Exactly. Yeah.
I do believe then that many, many more doors open, and there are many solutions become apparent.
Yeah. I'm a fan of the saying, "This is why we can't have nice things." I say that to my kids. Whenever they're running around and acting a fool, and something gets broken.
Yeah.
But also that's what public institutions are like. Is when we are not being good to one another, of course things are going to fall apart. And this is why we can't have nice things, is because we don't govern ourselves accordingly. So if I heard you right now, the primary thing I hear you saying that parents and other community leaders can do to be helpful is to just be gracious and not infer. I mean, sometimes people do say and do bad things. Sometimes
That's right.
teachers really do betray trust, and we need to have an eye on that and do something about it.
Absolutely.
But there are a lot of situations in life that don't require that level of anxiety or
Right.
resentment, and it shouldn't be too much to ask that grown-ups behave like grown-ups, and that when we have a concern, we bring it to each other with respect and with the possibility that maybe I'm seeing things wrong. Help me see things differently. But if we're coming at each other with, hey, I don't like the way that my kid came home and reported this to me, or hey, I really don't like the way that this letter read, and then you're airing that publicly in writing, that has a huge toxic effect on the community that we've seen time and time again. And I know it's not just a Nowata thing, but I think there has to be an intentional, if we want to have nice things, if we want to have people who are happy to serve our community, then we have to fight that short-term urge to write something angrily and to be thinking more about the long term. Do I really want my teacher to be an enemy? My kid's teacher to be an enemy? Do I really want to be at odds with the school district and looking at homeschooling or transferring school districts? That doesn't sound fun to me. So how about we just have the hard conversation right now? And maybe it doesn't have to get bad. So I think that that's something that's not just school districts. I think that's every institution. I mean, this is why we see people withdrawing from public and just watching Netflix all day and playing video games all day. It's just easier in the short term to do things on our own terms and not have to deal with other people. But long term, that really warps us.
Yes.
And we have to work collaboratively on things with people that we don't always see eye to eye with, and we have to be gracious.
Right. And huge points you brought up. And that's what, again, along with those critical thinking skills and the ability for kids to discern fact from opinion, collaborating, working with people that you don't see eye to eye with, that's a skill. That's not something that you're necessarily born with.
Right.
But we have to put kids in positions so that they are doing that collaboration and that they are thinking for themselves.
Yes.
I'd read, this was a few years ago, but I read from an executive from a major oil company based out of Houston. I don't remember if it was Exxon or what the oil company was at the time, but one of the things that struck me when they were talking about college graduates and hiring people, and he said, I'd like to hire one time. I'd like to hire somebody that I don't have to hold their hand and make every decision for them because they're not equipped to do that, because they've never, because they've grown up in a time and in a way that didn't foster collaboration, didn't foster critical thinking, and so can't make a decision if you can't think. And
Right, yeah.
And so you have to be able to have the tools to be able to think through problems, and that's what's important. And so that's why I'm a big fan of areas that slow kids down, such as I'm a fan of chess clubs, because that's a thinking game. That's something that you can't just move, and it's not a quick game. And so, or coding, is become because
learning
it's
to
a
code,
logical
yeah.
thing, because that's not a quick thing, and you have to be able to problem solve to be able to figure that out. Math is almost a whole nother language, and a lot of times and the reason math seems like the skills have been getting worse over time, part of that has to do with the fact that you have to think through a math problem, and if you make a mistake, you've got to be able to have the patience to go back through
Yes.
and find that mistake.
Yes.
And so those are all skills. Reading music is another thing that helps kids develop thinking skills, that helps them cognitively.
Yes.
And so I think that we've got to, again, and I circle back to it, a melding, if you will, of those of the things that worked and mattered 30 years ago with the new ways of maybe presenting them that we have now. But I think the skills in and of themselves are important, and whether it be because of budgets or because of different things that sometimes, the State Department takes away a lot of our autonomy, and they tell us here's what you need to do, and they give us an unrealistic amount of standards and say you have to teach each one of these, and so we know that if I have a list of 15 things and I've got 3 hours to accomplish those 15 things, probably I might get them done, but they're not going to be done well.
Sure.
They're going to be. I'm going to get them done. I'm going to meet the bare minimum, and then I'm going to move on because I've got X number of minutes to do X number of things, and that's the requirement. But if I have a list of 3 things or 4 things, and I have that time period, now I can teach that to mastery. Now I can take I can dive deep into it, and make sure that those things are being taught rather than touching on it and saying I taught it and moving on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, our teachers get put into impossible situations.
Yes.
And so we've got to. So at some point, common sense and reason has to win. It has to. It has to be the forefront, and it has to be the foundation of what we're trying to do. We have to be able to look and say, okay, what's important? What do we need my second grader to know to be successful in third grade? What is that? What does that require? And then we're gonna focus on those things, and and I think that's how you grow, and that's how you end up with a well-balanced student or a child who is reading on grade level, who understands mathematics and understands numeracy and can do those things. So again, my philosophy is we use common sense and we do what's best for kids.
Yeah, common sense is harder to find nowadays than once upon a
Not
time.
so common, is it?
No, it's not so common. But I love hearing your thoughts on it, and I if I haven't said it yet, I think you're working with an excellent staff over there. I personally know a number of them and the heart that they have for their students. And I just think you're very, there are challenges in Nowata, but I just think you're a very blessed man to step into this community and have the team to work with that you've got. We've talked through a good deal of stuff, and I appreciate how candid you've been and how transparent. Is there anything else that you're thinking would be helpful to make sure that the community of Nowata knows about you, or are we at the place now where we can just watch you and see what you do and come alongside you as best as we can?
I would like to say that, I think half of the battle is getting to know somebody, is building that relationship, and that's my goal with the community and with our businesses. I want our community members, our family members, to know that my door's open, that there's nothing on my desk. There's not a single piece of paper or form or report or item that's more important than the student, the community member, the family member that's going to be sitting across from me. I don't care what's going on. If I'm there, you're going to have 100% of my attention. I'm going to listen to what you have to say, and we're going to talk through things. And I invite people, to come if they see me. I'm going to try to be visible. That is my responsibility. I'm going to be visible at community events and within the community. We're moving into a home on Pecan Street, and hopefully about the middle of August, and so it's important that we're a part of the community. It's important that we share in the struggles that they have, and because their struggles are our struggles too. We're humans, and I guarantee you we go through a lot of the same things, and so. So as far as that goes, I think that's going to be a shared responsibility as far as my involvement. I'm going to make sure that I make a concerted effort to put myself out there and be a part of the community, and I hope that is reciprocated, that people feel comfortable coming to me and wanting to get to know me a little better too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, now that you've invited that, I think people will be eager to reach out to you, I think, and build those connections. Is there a particular way that you prefer that people who don't already know you get a hold of you? Do you want them to call the office, send you an email, find you on Facebook? How's a good way to connect with
Any
you?
and all. If they and so that's one thing. Again, I enjoy conversations. But answering a question on an email or doing something if that's convenient for them, or they're just looking for some information, or they're trying. Absolutely, I'll communicate any way that I can. I'm not afraid of people having my phone number, and matter of fact, I'll give it right now if that's okay. It's
Go ahead.
440-935-8134. If the only thing you can do is send a text message, that's great. I'll answer a text message. And my email address is on the website, tsimpson@npsok.org. You can email me. You don't have to have an appointment to come in. Sometimes that's hit and miss, though, just depending on what I've got going on. If I'm there, or if somebody else is in the office, you may have to wait a few minutes. But I invite the conversations, and I invite people to go ahead and connect. And even if it's just to get to know me better, or they have an opinion about something, I'm happy to hear it, happy to listen, and happy to visit.
Well, let's not test that too much, but I'll encourage you, if you've been watching this and you've gotten to the tail end of this, we'll go ahead and put his contact information in the show notes. So if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, just get out of full screen, and you should see it at the bottom there. I hope this has been a good visit for you, and that it's helpful for you in knowing how to participate in the community and support, and if you're a person of faith, to pray for the public school system. I would urge you to consider ways in which you can support our school system and our children and Mr. Simpson directly. So don't push his invitation too far to reach out, but do consider ways in which you can build him up and make sure that he is equipped with all the information he needs to know for our community. So anyway, we're gonna conclude our time together. Tim, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's been fun for me too. So I'm hoping to make this a more regular thing for our church. So if anybody watched this and you think this is a good thing to get to know public leaders and how we can support them and pray for them, then feel free to, if you are a community leader, give me a call, and I'd love to sit down with you. Or if you know somebody in the community that it'd be good for us to pray for and know how to support, then feel free to help me connect. So anyway, thank you for the time you spent with me. God bless you, and I'll see you next time. All right.